In this video, we'll continue looking at inequalities. And here we want to translate statements into inequalities or translate English statements into algebraic statements. So let's take a look at what we have here. Example 3. Translate each English statement into an algebraic statement. A. The police on the scene said that the car was traveling more than 80 miles per hour. Use the variable s for speed. Well, if the car was traveling more than 80 miles per hour, it couldn't be traveling, obviously, less than, and it couldn't even be traveling exactly 80 miles per hour. It had to be traveling more than that, and so we say that S had to be greater than 80 miles per hour here. B. The owner of a trucking company said that the payload of a truck is the contents, or what the truck is carrying, must never exceed 4,500 pounds. Use the variable P for payload. And so I have a note here. Must never exceed means that it can't be greater than. It can be equal to, it can be less than, but it can't be greater than. So we say that it must be less than or equal to 4,500 pounds in this case. So must never exceed, even though it talks about being over because of the word must never in front of it, it really is the opposite of that. And so we want to say S has to be less than or equal to 4,500. All right, so here are a couple examples for you to practice. You can pause the video, try them out, and start the video back up again to make sure that you're understanding what we've done so far. Ready? Student practice 3. Translate each English statement into an algebraic statement. During the drying cycle, the temperature inside the clothes dryer must never exceed 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Must never exceed means it can get to that far, but it can't go any further. So we would say that temperature has to be less than or equal to 180 degrees. B. The bank officer said that the total consumer debt incurred by Wally and Mary must be less than $15,000 if they want to qualify for a mortgage to buy their first home. So their debt must be less than 15,000. So in this case, it can't equal 15,000. It has to be less than 15,000, and we say D is less than 15,000. All right, some more examples. You can, if you feel confident, pause the video at any time, try them out, turn the video back on to see whether you're on the right track. 41. At Normandale Community College, the number of credits a student takes per semester must not be less than 12 to be considered full-time. So I have a note here, must not be less than means that you can be equal to 12 or you can be greater than 12, but you can't be less than 12. So we would say that C must be greater than or equal to 12. 42. A person is considered underweight if his or her BMI, body mass index measurement, is smaller than 18.5. Use the variable capital B for BMI. Well, if the BMI measurement has to be smaller than 18.5, then we can directly say that capital B must be less than 18.5. Height limit. In order to ride the roller coaster at the theme park, your height must be less than 48 inches. Use H for height. So here's a new phrase that we haven't encountered yet. Must be less than. Must be at least 48 inches. So I have a note here. It says must be at least means that it can be equal to or it can be greater than, but it can't be less than. So it must be greater than or equal to 48 in this case. So must be at least means that you can be that amount or greater, but you can't be less than. So we say greater than or equal to there. 44, boxing category. To box in the featherweight category, your weight must not exceed 126 pounds. So we've worked with this before. Must not exceed means you can get all the way up to that point, including that point, but you can't go past it. So you can be less than 126 pounds. You can be equal to 126 pounds, but you can't be greater than 126 pounds. So we would say that W must be less than or equal to 126 pounds. So when we're translating these English statements into inequalities, some of them are easy to do. If the quantity says the BMI must be less than 18.5, so that's easy to translate. We just say capital B is less than 18.5. But with some of these other phrases, as in must not be less than, or must be at least, or must not exceed, these take a little bit of thinking and we have to be careful with them. So on the next slide, I have some important phrases to look out for and the symbols that we will use to translate them into inequalities. The first one, must not exceed. Again, if you can't exceed something, you can get up to that point, but you can't go past it. So you can be less than, you can be equal to, but you can't be greater than. So we say that is equivalent to less than or equal to. Another, must be at most. So must be at most actually is the same thing as must not exceed. That means at most you can be a certain amount. You can be less than that. You can get up to that amount, but you can't go beyond that amount. So must be at most is another example of less than or equal to. Must not be less than. Must not be less than means that you can't be less than, but you could be equal to that amount. You just can't go under the amount, and you can go over the amount. Again, you just can't go under the amount. So this would be an example of greater than or equal to. Finally, must be at least. Must be at least means you can be that amount, you can be greater than that amount, but you can't go under that amount. And so must be at least is another example of greater than or equal to. So that's a summary of what we've been working with here. And what we're going to do with these phrases is that we're going to translate word problems or applications into inequalities or into algebraic statements and then solve for these unknown variables. So that'll do it for this video, and we'll continue with the next section in the next.